Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm joined by my favorite co-host, Jen. Hey.
Hi, nice to be here today.
I know. So you're coming off of, I guess, yesterday you had no school, so you had kids home. You have kids home again today. You have a sick kid home today?
I have a sick one. 'Tis the season.
Mm.
'Tis the beginning of a long season.
Yes, it is just the start of a season.
Mm.
But, at least the majority are in school today, right? It's a quieter house.
There are no children chasing other children around with Nerf guns today. Yes, we just have one on the couch watching. I believe she's watching Friends, so I can deal with that.
Yes, that was a nice conversation I had with you yesterday. I had no interruptions. Just so everyone knows, Jen and I talked yesterday, as we often do, but there was Nerf guns flying. There was requests to hide in your bedroom. There's a lot of activity going on in your house yesterday.
Everyone had friends over, and the boys were attacking the girls, and there was just nothing I could have done to stop it. I tried. I was helpless, and they pretended they didn't, but they all had a lot of fun. And they were off their screens.
And that's a win. There's your win for the week, Jen. I was going to ask you what your win for the week is. Yeah, you had a mostly screen-free Monday.
Yes, I may have, and it was very funny. My son's friend wanted to shoot me with the Nerf gun, and he put up his hands, and he said, "My mom is off limits."
Yes, good for him.
So there's my second win. I didn't get shot.
Well, I'm super excited for our podcast today because we're joined by Cait Mayet, and Cait is amazing. Like she's has this story that I love. So, she worked in claims and for a brokerage and for some time, and then came together with a bunch of other claims people, attorneys, and we're like, I think we could do it, and we could probably do it better. And they started their own company. They started Tivra Management, and and it just a year ago, and they've grown exponentially in the last year. It's amazing.
It is amazing to think that these 5 women who were just kind of sitting around and thought hey, I could do it better than you. And they did.
Yes. And they're doing it, and they're growing, and I love Cait's management style in the sense that she self-proclaims she doesn't have a specific management style. She has to be fluid for whoever she is working with and to work with what works best for them. So you're in for a treat. So with that, let's bring her in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good morning, Cait. Welcome to Claims Never Sleep. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. I'm so happy to have you today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I mean, our listeners didn't get to hear our pre-podcast chat that we talked about all things hair care, reading, and social media and YouTube controls for our children. I guess it doesn't necessarily go to the claims podcast, but interesting no less.
Definitely.
But I'm so happy to have you on here. You and I connected a week or so ago and had a great chat about, everything that you're doing with your company. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about you, because that's what we like to talk to everybody who comes on. So so our listeners know who it is that we're talking to, how you got into claims and what your story is. And everyone's story is a little bit different. So I'm curious, what was your path into the claims industry?
It's kind of accidental. I started out way back when my first job out of college. It was an administrative assistant, but it was working for a brokerage that was running an OSIP. And I ultimately, by the time I left that particular company, I was running that OSIP alongside the account exec. So I kind of fell into it because I was looking for a job, and and they were relatively small, so I learned a lot just kind of by doing and by being there, and worked my way up. And then I ultimately ended up in a risk management position at a construction company, and that was where I really, excuse me, got into the more direct claims handling. So we had a pretty robust risk management program there, and we really were very, very strict about what was required of all of the subcontractors that were going to come onto the job site. So I think I've read every like really tiny artisan contractor policy in the tri-state area, like the whole policy. And we've heard some really weird names. And I remember working when I ultimately went to work in for a carrier. People would receive these tenders or certificates of insurance from smaller subcontractors and be like, "Who is this insurance carrier?" I'd be like, "I know them." Like, what? They write like eight people. I'd be like, "I know. I probably read 3 of them." So it was really a great exposure. I kind of got to see a little bit of everything, at least in the New York world.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up in-house at a carrier because I wanted to be a little more hands-on with the litigation, because obviously in the risk management side of things, we were a little more behind the scenes. We were very involved, more than a lot of people usually are at a general contractor, but there's only so much you can control, right? The claims administrator is the one doing the day in and the day out, and they're controlling the litigation. So I got a little bit more into that working for the carrier. And then ultimately I was, working for a carrier for several years, and um, we sort of started, different friends of mine and what they call recovering attorneys who are working in claims. Um, we would all kind of sit down and talk about the different claims we were seeing and the problems that we were seeing with with the industry in general, and we all kind of had a lot of the same complaints, right? It was like, you know there's the training, I guess, isn't there for a lot of the claims professionals anymore. And so the technical expertise was lacking in a lot of places. And we would find that our claims professionals were struggling in that regard and not getting the support that they needed. And sometimes the people that we were working with, or co-carriers we were working with, their claims professionals, I can ensure that my team is trained and that my team has the knowledge they need, but the other people that we're working with didn't. And we really saw a need for sort of um, more technical expertise in the industry, and a little bit more, I guess, passion. Like, we really cared about making sure that our claims professionals, were prepared and were supported. And we were very concerned with making sure that they had like a well-rounded understanding of things. There's the technical expertise, there's business acumen, there's thinking about, how much are we going to pay out in defense costs on this claim versus how much it's going to cost to settle it. And maybe it's not worth it to fight it. Maybe it's going to cost us more. Even though it's a really great argument, maybe it's a very expensive argument.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would think about all those kinds of things that we weren't seeing in the industry. And so a bunch of us got together and said, well, let's make it happen. Let's do that. Let's fill that gap. So that's how I ended up here at Tivra.
Well, and I love that, and I want to jump into Tivra, but before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about your background, though, because you were talking about being like really going all in on the contracts. And do you find like that, is that like a personal like interest of yours, like you really really enjoy the contractual
I
stuff?
do. I like contracts. I like coverage. I mean, coverage is contracts, right? It's all kind of
Right.
hands in hand. Your policy is a contract, right? And so I really enjoy that, and I was very involved in that when I started out with the risk management position with the GC. And so I think that's how I kind of got engrossed in it all. I was responsible at that time for writing a lot of those contracts and rewriting them when case law changed, and we were trying to make sure that our stuff was airtight, our contracts were airtight. And it's a big problem that we see now, is that the contracts that on the carrier side that you get in as a claims professional are mostly garbage. Like, they protect you from nothing. And we look at these sometimes and we're like, man, like, I wish you had somebody look at this before you use this particular
Yeah.
contract for everybody that you have on your job site. Or even worse,
Right.
sometimes there are no contracts. And they're like, well, we know the guy. He's really nice.
Oh, don't you love that? Yeah.
Awesome.
He was the best man at my wedding. Great guy.
Right? And you're like, I have had situations where it was like, oh yeah, no, it was my girlfriend's dad's company and he like promised me it would be okay. And I was like, that was your legal strategy. Like, oh my God. And it's just, I mean, this is what we do, so we know. But as a tiny artisan contractor, of course, why are they going to know that? That's not what they do. I also don't know plumbing, right? Like, that's not my
Yeah.
expertise. And so I feel like there's definitely a need for that, like, guidance on a lot of these contractors. So.
And so so you were at a broker for some time and then you moved to the
Mhm.
carrier. How was that switch over for you?
It was interesting. So when I was at the construction company before going to the carrier, and what was odd about that is while I had more control over the litigation and things like that, which is what I was looking to do, to kind of dig more into that, then there were other things I had less control over, things like the contracts, and uh, it was a little bit. I guess of a shock because I went from being able to ensure that all of my risk transfer was going to be airtight
Mm-hmm.
and literally not paying out a dime to getting in these these claims and reviewing documentation that was just like a mess. And there's nothing I could do about it because at this point, like claims already here, and like I
Yeah.
don't work for them, so I all I can say is like, well, the language here it could use improvement, and we're not going to get the risk transfer that we want here, and that's kind of it. So it's a very different world. But I think the good thing or the thing that benefited me is what I hear from my recovering attorney friends a lot is what was so difficult for them was going from the I want to make the argument, I have a really good argument for this, I want to win this motion, or this is going to be a really really awesome MSJ, and understanding that Mika had mentioned earlier that maybe it's not worth it in this claim, maybe it's going to cost you $20,000 to fight this and I could settle it for 15.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very they always say all of them repeatedly say that it was the most difficult transition for them was that switch in mentality. And so fortunately for me, I was coming from that mentality already, and
Mhm.
that was beneficial for me. It made it a little bit easier.
Yeah, you can see Jen and I'm like, yeah, definitely settle
Yeah.
it if you can. Like,
Right, exactly.
And it's funny that you said that. I went from practicing to claims back to practicing, which is like a
Okay.
weird transition for
Wow.
people.
Yeah.
I was in recovery and then went back.
Yeah. Fell off the
But
wagon.
but it's funny. I was at this firm before I went to practice and now came back,
Okay.
and that's kind of how we approach cases,
Right.
right? As long as the client's on board with that, if you can settle it for less than it's what it's going to cost to defend it, why
Definitely.
not?
Right.
So I always kind of had that mentality. So it's just very interesting to hear about the attorneys who were at firms that were like, no, file the motion, go through the steps,
Yeah.
that it probably is like a weird transition for them.
Yeah, we see it a lot on the claims side and the carrier side too,
Mhm.
like from the claims management side that you have a lot of, I would say the vast majority of the attorneys that we work with don't think like that. The mentality is very much like, well, I'm working the case. And if there's a different strategy we could take that could shut the case down, that's something that we're presenting from the claims side and saying, no, hold on, back up, wait a minute. Like, what if we did this and tried to shut it down? And sometimes you get lucky. Like, there are definitely attorneys that like, okay, if I have a case where my goal here is I don't want to be trying this. This is one I want to get rid of. You have your certain attorneys that you can go to and that you can trust to do that. But those are the gems, to find somebody where that they'll tell you, I'm gonna like I don't think I should work up this case. And I've had some attorneys, rarely, but I get lucky where I've worked with, and those are the ones you use again. Well, they'll say to me, I don't actually think that we should go forward with these depositions. I think I should push them off and try to settle it. I think I'm going to stall, things like that. Like the strategy is not to work it up because we know we want to settle it and things like that. Like, why are we going to go through the motions of something to spend more money on when it's ultimately not the goal? And I think having that mentality is really important. Um, because a lot of times if counsel doesn't necessarily always have that in mind, and it becomes difficult for our claims professionals to kind of you know I guess stand up and say, well, no, hold on, I don't want to do that, because
yeah.
there is this mentality that counsel maybe knows better than you. And it's also something we try to teach, where it's like counsel
Yes.
is your partner in this and they're effectively
Mhm.
one of your experts. Counsel is your legal expert, but they're not driving the case. My claims professional is driving the case. And that's something that we really try to push and teach to our claims professionals. It's really important to us.
Yeah.
It
And to
is.
push back on counsel, just because counsel
Hmm.
says, oh, like this is my recommendation doesn't mean you have to take it.
Right. Right. Or ask why. I tell them all the time, you don't have to say, I think you're wrong, but you can absolutely ask why. You should ask why.
We do training for all of our new associates to teach them about that as well. And I always tell them, I was like, the claim professional, especially for you as a new associate, knows more than you.
Yes.
Don't assume that you're the expert on the case, because
Right.
the claims person might have 100, 120, 140 open files, right? Whereas we may have 30.
Right.
So they have seen it. Like, I almost like it, you're a jack of all trades, right? When you're a claims professional, like, you know a little bit about everything. So that's, and I think it goes back to what you were saying as well about the training for the claims professionals, right? Because they need to know how to think outside the box as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they need the confidence to know that they do know more than they think they do. And a lot of it we talk about too is what we try to teach our claims professionals is um, it's not about knowing everything, it's about spotting issues.
Yes.
So if you can point out, hey, this is a red flag here, we have a lot of resources with our group. We have people like you've heard I come from a construction background. I've got people with a med mal background. I've got somebody with, more of a hospitality. I have also done a lot of work with real estate developers. We've got people who are very, very strong in coverage. We've got a little bit of everything. And so we've got pollution professional. I mean, the list goes on, about everything except maybe workers' comp. We don't do a lot of workers' comp. But so if you can point out that maybe something is off here, this is something we need to look more into, then you can go and ask somebody. We can find somebody who is an expert in that. We can find somebody who will know the answer. But it is our job, as the file handlers, to spot it and figure out who to ask. It's the same way that we use experts. It's the same way that we use counsel. You take a look at a file and you say, well, do I know anything about fire sprinkler systems? Not really. But I know that I need an expert that's going to know it. And I know that I need them to answer this question. Well, okay, I can find an expert to do that, and then I know that this case is I'm going to need counsel on this because I need to know about, what our options here are regarding this during the litigation, right? So, okay, I can find a counsel that's going to be good at that. I can find a counsel that's really good at professional liability. And I can find a counsel that can answer all those questions. But you have to know to ask the question.
Right. Yeah. That's a conversation my husband and I were just having actually the other day. He is a physician. And I was saying, like, sometimes when I'm on the phone and somebody asks me a question I don't know, I kind of get panicked and I hate telling them, I don't know. I will look it up and I will get right back to you, or I'll ask somebody else. And I was like, I hate saying that.
Right.
And I was like, sometimes people call and they think that we're just going to have all the answers all the time.
Right.
And he was saying from his perspective too. And he's like, but that is the sign of like a smart and intelligent person, right? To know and not to pretend and to say, he's like, he does it too as a doctor. Like, hey, I haven't encountered this problem before. Let me bring it to my team and I'm going to call you back once we discuss it. Right. And so I think that's such an important skill to have.
Use your resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then also, like, I notice this too. Like, people sometimes fail to understand that just because you're an attorney or you're in claims, that you know every little thing about that. Like, I had a friend come to me recently, and they're like, "Oh, I'm starting a new business. I need to write in a license agreement." I was like, "That is not what I do."
No, that's not the field. It's different. It's
and they're like, "Thanks for your
law.
help." I was like, "Yeah, I could try to help find someone, but I'm not even. I can't do that for you. I can find you someone who can, but it is not
exactly.
me."
Exactly.
So you mentioned, though, you have a group of recovering attorneys. So are the one? How did you find this group of recovering attorneys? These people that you've worked with in the past, and you joined together to start your company, or
and it's a little bit of both. So a couple of recovering attorneys. Have a risk management background. Some people have been in claims their whole career. A claims background. So we're a good mix, I think. And it's people we all kind of worked together over the years, and some form or another at some point in our past lives. And we always get together doing different conferences and stuff like that, and we always keep in touch. So that's kind of how it ended up. We were some people. Some of us, not all of us, were together at a conference, and actually there was some misinformation in a presentation, and we were all like, no, like what is happening? And you kind of sit at the table and you all go,
yeah.
Did that really just happen? You're like looking at each other with the wide eyes, like, did you hear that too? We were doing that, and at this particular conference, they were talking about additional insured endorsements and whether caused in whole or in part or arising out of was the broader language. And the attorney and the claims professional that were doing the presentation said that caused in whole or in part was broader. and would provide broader coverage. And we were all kind of looking at each other like, no, it wouldn't. And we were really quite shocked. I mean, this is at a conference where people are
Mm-hmm.
coming here to learn this. And we were like, okay, it's not just that we see it in our day to day. It is all over the place. There's just people who, in the industry who don't have necessarily have the training or the support or the technical skills or the knowledge that we are hoping to see all over the place. And so, of course, if that's the training that you're finding places, obviously there are going to be gaps. And so we were like, this is like, well, what can we do about this? Was kind of our mentality, And so that's where we sort of started casually talking about and brainstorming the idea of starting something up for ourselves.
Like, I like love this story because it's almost like akin to like, oh, we are all out at like, at a bar and we wrote up our agreement on our business plan on a napkin. Like that's what it sounds
It
like.
really was though. It was because it began like chit chat. Like it was, when you throw something out there and you're like, I should just run the world. You know what I mean? It was a little bit like, we should just, if only we were in charge. It was like, if only I had my own company. And you kind of throw things out like that. And then we kind of were like, well, like, why don't we though? Like, wait a minute, but we could.
Yeah. So, well, like, talk us a little bit through that process. So, when did this, when did you guys spur the idea, and then when did it come to fruition?
Oh, I think it was several years in between. I would probably
Okay.
say a couple of years. I don't even actually remember the exact date of that conference. I should look it up and see if I can figure out which one it was. I remember the conversation and the room, my little snippets of memory. But it was a while. It was a little bit of talking about it and kind of very theoretical and do you really think this is possible and yeah, one day we should do that. And then kind of, well, why not one day being sooner? And it sort of morphed that way. And then I remember, the one day that we actually were like, all right, we're gonna like pull the trigger, we're gonna do this was like terrifying, we
Yeah.
were like, oh my God, are we really gonna do this? But exciting, very exciting, very gratifying.
So,
So
did
how
you?
many? Oh,
I was gonna say, did you continue all working at your jobs while you got things off the ground, or was it like, all right, we're quitting, we're
A
all
little bit of
in?
both. It depends on the person. Some of us did, some of us didn't. Yeah, but some of us were, yeah, all in, and then very shortly thereafter, we all quit and kind of did it full time. It's a lot of work, so you can't really do both at the same time. We
Mhm.
very quickly realized it just wasn't feasible. So those of us who had stayed at our other jobs were like, this is not going to be long term. We can't do it. It's just there's a lot, and I think I probably work more now than I did when I was at a
Wow.
carrier,
Yeah.
but I like I'm happier. I'm working
Yeah.
because I'm interested. I'm working on a matter because I want to. I'm thinking about that contract because I'm intrigued by it and I'm looking for it solved, as opposed to I have this due date and I have to get it done.
right. So how many of you were there who started this business, and are you all still involved?
Yes, and 5. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
so it's exciting. We're still relatively new, so it's still exciting.
okay. So, like, but tell us a little bit more about it. Like, as our listeners are like,
Mhm.
okay, you're talking about
Yeah.
it. We heard the name.
So
What
it's
is it?
so we do claims management and risk management. So there's a TPA arm that we handle claims because a lot of us have a claims background, and we also do risk management, which is a little bit more like what I had done at the construction company in my past. A lot of actually, it's interesting. A lot of our referrals on both sides tend to come from attorneys,
Mhm.
who you would think it would be other like maybe claims professionals or something, but especially for our self-insured clients because. You tend to see it's the same thing we just talked about earlier, right? Where you see a lot of contracts come in on claims where you're like, this is terrible. Like you need somebody to be looking at this before we get this far, and or you'll see claims come in that are handled by a TPA for self-insured that by the time they've gotten to the attorney, it's like the matter's a disaster and nobody's worked up the way that you would have hoped that the claims team would have worked it up.
Yeah.
And there's just information missing and there's avenues not pursued and we're in suit now, and you can kind of see like where you wish so much more had been done or something had been done differently in the past, that would have set it up better, or even sometimes that I have a lot of contacts, attorneys and friends and stuff that we speak with that would say this probably never should have gone into suit. This never should have gotten to me. If it probably could have been settled earlier. Something could have been salvaged, And so we actually surprisingly get um, a lot of referrals, especially for those self-insureds, those
Yeah.
from those attorneys that look at the claims and see it from that perspective, like when we're already at the too late point and saying, well, if you'd gotten somebody involved earlier, this really would have helped you. And now this is the fourth or fifth claim of like this, where I'm seeing this as a pattern.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of, then we have the opportunity then at that point to step in earlier on the other stuff before it gets that far and before things have already gone down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And so, but take me back to the start. Like, how did you guys go about like getting everything off the ground and going?
Yeah.
And like, because I imagine it was probably terrifying at first though, too. Like, we
Yeah.
need clients. Like,
Yeah. It was a lot of like, I feel like maybe like old-fashioned networking, like, conferences that we were going to. We're still
Mhm.
going to those conferences and talking to people, and a lot of casual conversations, I suppose, too. Where when you're at these conferences, you always end up in conversations with other professionals in the industry who are seeing the same problems that you're seeing, and they're going, "Oh my God, isn't it terrible that?"
Mhm.
So a lot of conversations started like that, where it's like, I know, actually, as you mentioned that, here's my card and this is who I am and I agree. And a lot of that old-fashioned networking and how can we help you, and then referrals
Mhm.
from attorneys in the field that we've worked with, some people in the insurance industry as well, but I would say primarily from the risk management context, saying I know another insured that could use the assistance. And then yeah, some from carrier contacts that are perhaps looking for, if they know somebody who's looking for a TPA for a book of
Mhm.
business they have. A lot of word of mouth and
Yeah.
a lot of chatting about mutual grievances, I suppose.
It's like airing of the grievances in
Exactly.
claims.
Yeah.
Um, so what would you say that were some of your, like, okay, so you're a year in, right? I think you
Yeah,
told me
about
you're
a
a
year.
year in.
Hmm.
So what have been like your biggest challenges so far?
That's a good question.
Like, how much time do you have?
Right. Oh gosh. All right. Biggest challenges. I think I think maybe the like how much of that like networking and pitching that,
Mhm.
that's because that's not my background. My background is claims and risk. And so it was very much a shift for me to have to go to like promoting a business,
Mhm.
right? Promoting myself, which is not something that
Yeah.
I find very comfortable to do at all. And so I think that has definitely been for me, I guess, on a personal level, a personal challenge is that shift to like self-promotion. Which was odd, although I think that's probably why so much comes out of casual conversation, because that for me would be what's more natural, is talking about why do we do bring something to the table. So that's a little bit easier, but that's definitely been a challenge for
Yeah.
sure. And I think the other challenge is finding talent. I think that's a
Mhm.
problem that we see across the industry. We've been growing very quickly, and across the industry, finding claims professionals who are asking the right questions, and who not necessarily know everything. Of course, as we said before, that's definitely not the goal and never the expectation by any means, but people who are looking at things the right way, are asking the right questions. I've had claims professionals who maybe have not been doing this that long, but when they look at a file, they're asking really interesting questions and they're looking at it in a very unique angle. And that's what I really love to see.
Mhm.
And that's hard to find. Those types
Yeah.
of people are hard to find. And I think there's also a fear in the industry because people are leaving, I guess, the industry because you're not getting the right training. A lot of places that you go and you're kind of left hang out to dry. And I think that that's probably also causing some difficulty in hiring in the industry is there's not enough support for our claims professionals. So that's the other, I think,
Mhm.
big difficulty that we see.
But there must be a challenge on your end too to provide the training, a robust training, because you're
Yeah.
new, like
Yes.
you're growing yourself, so you don't have all these systems and things
No.
in place. So
Yeah.
like you are going to mess up too. Like,
Yeah, like I said, I work a lot.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is that we are very um, we're very like involved. Like I know all my claims professionals very well,
Yeah.
like all of them. And that's important to me. And I think it's important to, all of us generally, at least, at Tivra, all of us find that very important that it is personal. And I do want you to do well. Like that means a lot to me personally that you do well, which I don't think people believe at first. They're like, yeah, okay, okay, lady. That's what
For
they all
you.
say. But I do. And so it is a lot of hands-on. Like I do a lot of trainings, and it's a lot of that same, if you ask that question, you bring up that question, there are a lot of roundtabling calls where we say, okay, I know so and so, these three people are really good at this, and hey, can I loop you in on this claim that we're talking about because we are brainstorming a strategy. And so it's a lot of what it comes down to, I think, and the way we've made that work has just been communication.
Hmm.
Constant open lines of communication all the time. Like when I tell you my door is always open, like my door is always open, and we're virtual, all of our employees, but um my virtual door is always open. And I welcome that little like 1 a.m. for call at random saying, can I just run this by you?
Hmm.
Because I think you can train to an extent, and there are definitely things, there are formal trainings on, like I know writing is a big one, for example, negotiation trainings we do as well, things like that, litigation management trainings, right, with their team. But a lot of it is just learning by doing. You get a claim, and maybe it's a bit of a stretch claim, and you've got to kind of figure out how to strategize something that's new to you, and you do that by involving the people around you, using your resources. If you have a question, if you don't necessarily know, even if you think you know and you just want a second opinion, and we really encourage that open line of communication. And that's been, I think, the best way that we've been able to train our people.
Yeah. And I love hearing that from you because like Jen and I struggle with this too. Because I'm in South Jersey, Jen is in Scranton,
Mhm.
our administrative assistant is out in Camp Hill, PA,
Mhm.
and we're growing this office as well. So I feel like like
Yeah.
something. I'm like, tell me more, tell me how you're doing it, because
We talk all the time.
yeah, we struggle with it too, just trying
Yeah.
to create to the right environment.
Mhm.
Because look, virtual work is not for everyone, and
Mhm.
not everyone likes it, and not everyone excels in it. However, for me, and I think for Jen, like it is ideal for us to help us manage our office and our
Right.
lives in this career.
Yeah.
um so it works well for me, but it's very hard to create a positive, like, cohesive environment. Like
Yeah.
it has its challenges.
It is challenging. It definitely is. And I did work remotely with a carrier for several years too. So I had a little bit of like, I guess, experience doing it. I actually find that that helped me tremendously because it gave me sort of a framework for how I wanted things to be run and how it worked for me when I was doing that at a bigger company, and what aspects I liked and what aspects I didn't. And it really, I think that's where we sort of started with that very open line of communication, because it is hard to not have a physical door to leave open. And
Yeah.
it's hard to have when people don't necessarily have an office they can just walk into, or just like wave at you, be like, oh, now that I have you, can I ask you this question? And so we do a lot of deliberate, like, meeting scheduling where, I'm going to have a set meeting with you every however often, and I'm going to have a team meeting. We do a lot of group conversation. I'm going to have team roundtables where we are going to discuss claims, like, with everybody, because that open discussion forum type of forum, it doesn't have to be a formal one, but it is, I think, incredibly important for growth. And it allows people to see, hey, this person might have a particular specialty in professional liability claims. And maybe this person has a claim it's not a professional claim, but maybe it's I don't know, a pollution policy, but it's claims that's on a claims made and reported basis, and that's not as common. And so, hey, that professional person, they're really good at claims made and reported. Let me ask them a couple of questions, and you have that
Hmm.
kind of um, sort of everybody knows each other, I guess is what it comes down to, and everybody starts to know what everybody's strengths are, and it
Hmm.
gives confidence to the adjusters themselves. The claims professionals themselves start to see where their strengths are, especially when they get a call from a coworker that's like, hey, I heard you were really good at this. Can you
Yeah.
help me with this? Or when they present, hey, you presented that really well. I have one I need to present. Can you help me? Things like that. And I think that's been really important, that there's just always open discussion between everybody.
Mhm.
We're a little flat in that regard. It's not this big chain of command where you've got to go ask through 18 people to get
Yeah.
something done, because nothing gets done and everyone's just intimidated.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I will say that is a challenge, I think, with being virtual, because I just remember being like a young associate, and if I had a question, I would just walk down the hall and find some other associate, and maybe I would go talk to the partner, depending if if I had enough knowledge that I wouldn't feel stupid walking into the
right,
office.
right.
And I think there's definitely a challenge. As much as you can say, like, call me whenever, my phone is always here, like, just picking up the phone and calling someone, and kind of like not interrupting their day, but just calling. Like, I feel like
Feels
there's a
intrusive.
yeah.
Yes.
And like, and to some extent sometimes it could be, and what I always
Mhm.
try to say is like, look, if I can't answer, I just won't answer it. I'll call you back as soon as I
Mhm.
can, but I'm
Yeah.
never offended if you're calling. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm happy.
Right.
But
I'm
I
thrilled.
understand the hesitation, because I would do the same thing,
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know what they're doing today.
Yeah.
I don't
What
want
if you're
to.
busy? I'm big on like, hey, do you have a minute? I very much operate the same way. And I find myself that I do it, right? So of course that the claims professionals would as well. And I think what's helped a lot for us is team chats. I don't know if I'm sure the claims professionals have their own team chat that doesn't involve management. Um,
100%.
I mean, I would, but I know there's also one with me on it, so there's a lot of, I find that even in the one where I'm on it, I see just the group chats of, hey, does anyone know how to do A, B, and C? And sometimes it's management that responds, right? And sometimes it's one of the other claims professionals, and it's very informal. And I think having times where we get together or we talk that are significantly less formal have been really important. Just
Yeah.
those like free discussions where like you can ask whatever you think is might be a stupid question. I'm also really big on pairing up newer employees with somebody who's been here longer, to have like a buddy, so they have somebody that they can call, like a mentor of some kind, if they can call and say, I have this really dumb question, I definitely don't want to call my manager,
Yeah.
or maybe this is just, I missed it, or something like that, where they just don't feel comfortable. They have a peer that's like a designated question answer,
Mhm.
so they don't feel like
Yeah.
they're intruding, because I've literally assigned this person to answer your questions, and it feels a little bit less intrusive that way.
I completely, like, I love that too, because it again, it takes me back to being like that young
Yeah.
associate, and like not wanting to ask the partner the question. You want someone that you feel comfortable being like, this is like, I remember
Yeah.
I've talked about this before, like, my very first law firm job. It was like probably my first month there, and the partner I worked for just gave me discovery, and she's like, all right, can you answer the discovery? I'm like, I don't know what the frick this
Like what?
discovery. And I again, I'm new. I went down, I just walked in the hall and went to the first friendly face and I'm still very close with her today, Lily. And I was like, Lily, she wants me to answer discovery. What do I do? And Lily had been practicing for 3 years. I had been practicing for like a day. And she's like, well, okay, first I have to figure out what's objectionable. I was like, how do I do that? I don't know.
What does that even mean?
But it was like so help. But it was like, that's what I needed, because they don't
Yeah.
teach you that in law school either. Like, how
Right.
to respond to discovery. You only learn it by doing
You're right.
and by asking questions. But I certainly was not going to ask the partner.
Who just
Um,
handed you the assignment? Be like, I don't know how to do that.
yeah, like she would be like, yeah, figure it out. Like, that's
Right.
part of the,
Exactly.
but I think it's so important to have those resources of people to go to, even though, like, I honestly do think, though, if someone come to me, like an associate came to me asking a question, I would first say, like, okay, well, what do you think? What steps did you take? I'm not going to do the
Right.
assignment for you. I'm happy to help you, but I would want to know, like, what steps you took to kind of try to solve your problem
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
without being like, here, you do it then. I know you gave it to me, but you do it.
Right. Exactly. Handing it right back.
So you started with the 5 of you, and now how many employees do you have?
We're about, gosh, I think we're about 30 now,
Good
including the
for
five of
Wow,
us.
you.
Yeah,
that's
we're growing
amazing to
Awesome.
pretty
hear.
fast. Yeah, we're growing fast. It takes a lot of hands to handle to handle claims.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's exciting.
So, what kind of claims are you handling? Like, and is it regional, nationwide? Like, what does
It's
it look like?
nationwide.
Good for
I've
you.
got a decent amount of construction. We've got professional liability lines. We have, on the GL arm, we've also got some hospitality, developers, real estate, things like that. What else? We've got some auto and trucking. What else? Can't think of them all off the top of my head, but a little bit of everything, really. We do
Yeah.
have quite the broad range of stuff that comes through. Depends on carrier need and self-insured need and stuff like that.
So are you sticking kind of to the construction since that's your
For the
area?
most part, yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of real estate development as well, construction and non-construction real estate, acquisitions and stuff like that. I've also done hospitality, really anything premises liability, which is pretty broad and generic. I've also done some auto and trucking, so I do handle some of those as well. But if somebody is looking for guidance or has a question on anything in the construction realm, that's usually they would come to me because that tends to be that's my strongest background, I guess. So anything construction BI or labor law or construction defect, that's sort of my forte. And definitely contracts and
Mhm.
coverage. I love contracts and coverage. I'm such a
I
coverage
do
nerd.
too. I think
Love it.
coverage, I worked for 2 different carriers, and the one carrier didn't really let us do anything that was a coverage issue. They would farm out, and I'd be like, no, no, no,
I
no,
love
I won't
that.
do that. That's
Give
not
it back. I know.
uh-huh.
I'm such a coverage nerd, and I feel like it's very much like a dichotomy in the industry. You either like really love coverage or you're a lunatic. Like, what is wrong with you that you love this? I love it. Contracts and coverage.
Well, also, I mean, I think you both of you are avid readers, and I think
Yeah.
that kind of like that picking apart the text and the comprehension piece. Not that we don't read a ton otherwise, but I just there I don't know. I feel like that's a common
Yeah.
theme with coverage.
That's a good point, actually. I never thought about that, but that
I
sounds
just
like makes
did.
a lot of sense. Just
Literally just
occurred to me
came to
now. It was brilliant.
me.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like I play the New York Times games every day still. Like everyone else
Right.
fizzled out a Wordle when
Yeah.
COVID lockdown happened. Now I still play every day.
Yeah.
All of
I
them.
love that stuff. I love that. I need a challenge. That's how I function. I
Yes.
need a challenge in my life. And if I ever find that I'm not being challenged enough, then I'm like I get stir crazy and I get really restless and bored. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's just probably why I love claims, to be honest with you.
Well, because it's always different,
It's always.
and there's a new challenge with every single one, and there's multiple challenges within each one.
Yeah.
So it's
It's always
it's
changing.
it's a toy box. You
Yeah,
got plenty to
exactly.
do.
And it changes every day. So there's always something new to learn, which I love. So yeah.
Um, so, but what have been you, what have been some of your other challenges with starting up? Like you mentioned, like staffing and talent. So, how are you getting around? Like, how are you conquering that or getting through those challenges?
Um, I think that what we have found is that the way that we interview, we ask a lot of technical questions. So we really try to like get to know the way your mind works in a way. And
Hmm.
I think that I've definitely, been involved in interview processes where it's a lot of fluff questions. And then by the end of it, I'm like, well, no idea how that's going to go. And then, the
Yeah.
person starts and you're like, gee, I'm so surprised. The resume looked so great, but this person does not really have any of the like knowledge that I was expecting. And so we've really kind of tailored our interview process to make sure
Yeah.
that we're asking the right questions. And I'm really trying to get to know what sure, but also like how you think. So I am really big on hypotheticals.
Hmm.
I love to ask, like I actually have a sheet somewhere that's like saved in my computer that has like a couple of hypotheticals depending on the positions and the
Yeah.
particular line of business and stuff that they're looking at. But because I like to know how you would go about this. And a lot of people, especially when you talk about construction and like especially when you talk about CD, a lot of the technical questions, they're like, trigger theories. They're like, I've got a list. I don't know, man. Like, I don't expect you to have the entire list of
Yeah.
every state and their trigger theories memorized. That's crazy. Right. Like I would pull that up as well. But what I want to know is if you had this sort of scenario, like how would you go about managing it? How would you think about it?
Hmm.
And so we find that we're asking a lot of questions that are not questions that I ever got in interviews for sure. So I don't know that they're very common, but we're definitely trying to kind of feel out how people think. And I am very big on, end of the interview, it's not necessarily do you know all the things. It's
Hmm.
it's how well do I think you can learn all the things?
Yeah.
How can I teach you? I mean, are you the kind of person that is going to accept feedback? And how are you asking the right questions where I think that I can really teach you this, or I can really support you in this, and I can really mentor you in this. And that's kind of what I tend to be looking for.
I love it. That kind of takes me back to college. I remember when a lot of people were interviewing for those investment banker jobs, and that they would be thrown those sorts of technical questions. And I remember at the time being like, "Oh man, that seems like a really tough interview to handle." But looking back, and I'm like, it makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
they're
And that's
trying to figure out how you think.
right. Like, I don't necessarily expect you to get the answer right, because
Mm-mm.
I can mentor you, I can train you, I can teach a lot of things, right? Not me personally, but we, and so there's a lot of wiggle room there in terms of like your level of knowledge. But I want to know that that I'm working with a candidate who can excel when I do train that person, or when I am mentoring with that person. I want to know that that candidate is somebody who is going to be, like I said, thinking the right way, asking the right questions, is going to receive that feedback. And that's something that I find very, very often is something I come across where I'm like, well, this person had a lot of potential, but it doesn't sound like they receive feedback well. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to be very hard to work with that person. It's going to be very hard to mentor and train that person because they don't want the feedback. And so that's something that's a big thing that I'm noticing, when I do interviews and stuff. And I think that's where our focus is that we know that there's not a lot of training that people are getting elsewhere. So how can I expect that you're going to know all the things if I have established that that's not a thing that you're getting elsewhere? That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
I just need to know that you can take that training and run with it.
Yeah. And it's not easy to get feedback. Like, it's not easy to be on the
Sure.
receiving end, because we all want to think we are amazing and we do a great job.
Right.
But it is like, it's just so important to make you better at everything that you
Yeah.
do. But I do think it does get to you, like it could get to you too. Like, I remember
Mhm.
way back when I spent all this time on this report. And I handed it into the partner, and I was like so proud of it. And he came down to my office. He's like, "Meghan, this needs a lot of work."
Oh no.
And it was like, of course, it was like Friday at like 4:45, and my heart like I think I was just new to this job though too, and I thought I did the best job ever.
Right.
But looking back at it, I did a shitty job. Like,
Knowing what you know now.
yeah, I'm like, I did not give a full analysis. I was like, negligence is blah, blah, blah. Like, I didn't dig in, and I'm like, well, no, what, I did do a crappy job, and he had to
Yeah.
tell me that. And the only way I would have done better moving forward is if someone pointed out. Otherwise, I just keep doing the same exact thing and giving it the same mediocre, crappy report over and over and over again. But in that moment,
It feels terrible.
I was like, oh man, I'm
Yeah.
done. They're gonna fire me on Monday.
But I also think like this is something, I mean, we're all parents, right? That we have to prime our children for, because I talk a lot about children's sport, like youth sports, right? Because my kids play. And there's so much of this, like even at a certain level, like everybody gets equal playing time. You can't give the kids any negative feedback because it might offend them and all of that. And it's like, what are we setting them up for?
Right.
What's going to happen when they get to their first job and the manager says, well, this wasn't great. Well,
yeah. And they don't know how to accept that.
You don't know how to accept that. And not even like just accept it, but like somebody's usually giving you feedback for a reason, right? Like your shot isn't great. Maybe if you try to do this with your wrist, or, I don't bend my knees enough when I do my forehand in tennis and I'm not getting under the ball. Like if nobody's giving you the feedback, then you're never going to get better. But we also need to learn how to accept it and use it and turn it into becoming better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also has a lot to do with, like, from our perspective as the person giving the feedback, like how do you give it in a way that is going to sit better, I'm not going to say better with that person. And I think a lot of it has to do with like knowing your people. And I used to remember, it was the question you always get in interviews is like, for a management interview is, what is your management style? And I used to hate the question because I don't have one, because if I had a management style, it would fail for about half of my people.
Right.
And I really feel that now more than ever, the larger that my group gets, I really feel that, like, I have to be adaptable. And we do. We
Mhm.
have to be able to give that feedback in a way that is going to suit that person. You can think about it with kids when you have like kids in sports, and to your example, you'll have the kids who, when you tell them they didn't play well that day, they cry. And you
Mhm.
have the kids that will go, I'll do better next time. And you tell them you didn't play, you played terribly today. They're like, okay, all right, next time is going to be better. And that's like two completely different types of people. Like we still have that as adults. We just maybe cry behind a closed door or
Yeah.
something. But like you still have the people who are going to react in those opposite manners, and you have to treat them differently, and you have to
Yeah.
adjust your style based on what they need.
Yeah.
My daughter likes to, and neither my husband nor I, we don't coach like her basketball team, but she likes to do these like skits where she pretends that she's us coaching her. And so she'll be me, and she's like, you'll be on the side of the bench being like, that was great. You're so awesome. But maybe next time you should try to do this a little bit differently. Like, and
So
she's right. Like,
cute.
I usually try to like couch everything with the like, start with a compliment and then
Right.
sneak in the, maybe we should try doing this.
Criticism
Maybe next
sandwich.
time. Yes, I love it.
Whereas my husband is more like, that was awful. Don't do that again. And he comes right out with the.
I
Yeah.
Not to generalize, but I do think that is the generally dad approach to sports feedback.
I feel like we're just a little more emotionally intuitive, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, again, I'm typecasting, but I think especially with girls, you need to do more of the criticism sandwich than I think boys. It's just like, yeah, do this, change this, do that, and then they kind of implement. I think the girls, you need to like be a
Yeah.
little gentler with your delivery, because
And I
I
feel like,
know when my husband does that with my daughters, like they don't hear it. They're not going to hear any of it.
yeah, I feel like also as women, we face a lot of criticism just like in life. Like it's something
Mhm.
that we become very accustomed to from an early age. And so we internalize it all, right? Most women would say that they internalize a lot of that criticism. And so because that's something that we're always going to be facing, you kind of have to think about how, I guess, we find ourselves already thinking about how it's received because we are very accustomed to receiving it. And it's
Mhm.
something that's always on our minds. And I think it is definitely something that you start to notice either when you have kids or when you start to, when you're a professional and you start to manage people and you start to realize how do you give that kind of feedback, and um, how do you adjust how you might give that feedback based on the person you are speaking with.
Yeah.
Yes. And that
Interesting.
must make you such a good manager.
Yeah.
I
That
hope
you
so.
even take the
You
time.
seem it.
Yeah.
Thanks. I like to think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard from some people that they like working for me, so I hope that the other ones think that way too. But I think it's so important. Like it is something I think about often. How am I going to approach a particular person for a particular issue? I'm very conscious of it, because I want to make sure that, like I think I said earlier, and believe it or not, like it actually really does matter to me that my people are excelling. It's really something that is very important to me, and so I'm very conscious of how my feedback is going to be received, because if it isn't received well, it's frustrating for me, sure, but it's also not beneficial for that claims professional either.
Yeah.
It's not going to help you.
Mhm.
So then if my feedback hasn't helped you, then I also haven't done my job.
Yeah. And have you, like, for yourself, have you done like some of your own education as to improve your management style? Like, because it sounds like I'm like,
Right.
is this just Cait? Like, is this just how you are, or if you've dug in and like really worked on it for yourself, or
A-
does this just come
yeah, I mean,
naturally to
yeah, a
you?
little bit of both. I think a little bit of both. I remember a while back I had taken, before starting the company back at a carrier, I had taken a some kind of, I forget what the training was, but some kind of training having to do with like having difficult conversations. And most of the time, these trainings that you have to take at a company are like really boring and you kind of roll your eyes, right? But it was actually like a really good one. And they talked about wording things in a way that is going to be disarming,
Mm.
which is something that I'm constantly thinking about. Just like on a personal level, it's just how I function, I suppose. I'm always very conscious of like, how I say what I say. And if I know I'm going to have a difficult conversation, I am sort of preparing out almost like that mental script, you know what I mean, of making sure that I present it in the right way. But they did talk about like, the compliment sandwich. And actually there was another way they had suggested doing it. I'll have to think on it. But it was, it was basically the compliment sandwich without the but.
Mm.
And the big thing was once you say the but or the however, it just negates everything
Yeah.
you've said before it. So it was, and,
Yes.
also in addition to how wonderful you were doing, I have another thing, that kind of mentality. And it was very interesting to me that other people also think very carefully about how they say things. It's not just me that repeats this over and over in my head. Which I always thought I thought it was a really great training, in particular, really helpful to think about how the same thing I guess we're saying, right? How what you are saying is perceived, because you could be 100% right and say it in a way that basically negates all of your rightness and just makes the other person upset or
Yeah.
makes you mean.
Again, I realize this all the time when I'm trying to talk to my kids.
Right?
Like when they like, why are you yelling at me? I'm like, I'm not yelling at
When
you.
did I
Like,
yell?
I'm like, I'm actually talking just like this. And like,
Mm,
but you have a tone that sounds like yelling. I'm like,
right. Okay,
okay, but like, can you pick up your shoes and put them away?
please.
Like I've asked you 6 times
Yes,
in a not
exactly.
yelling manner, but like put them away.
I'm
But
not yelling yet.
yeah, I mean, I do yell eventually, and then they're like, "How come you're yelling?" I'm like, "Well, because I asked you 15 times to do this." But I do think like that it's like that same type of style that when you're talking to your kids too, like they hear it
Hmm.
differently, or like I'm always
Yeah,
very conscious of how I'm wording things because
right.
again too with girls too, I'm like, I know how much you internalize this, and I don't want it, this negativity to be your like internal
Inner
dialogue
voice.
in your head and your inner voice. And so I very, very conscious of
Yeah.
how I'm trying to deliver. And am I perfect? Absolutely not. I mess up every day.
Mm. That, of course. Don't we all? Don't we all?
um so what is to come for you? Like you're growing,
Yeah.
do you like do you have like a 5-year goal for like how much where you want this to be?
That's a good question. I th I don't I don't know. I don't know that I have a very concrete goal. I think continuing to grow for sure. I'm sure if I asked some of my partners, we'd have like actual concrete numbers of where we wanted to be, but I don't know that I have them right now. But we definitely, the continued growth, we've been growing really fast, so that's really exciting. So, just to continue that, we want to. I think ultimately, what we really want is you know, um, to be the kind of company that when you hear Tivra, you think, oh, they're really good. Like they know what they're doing. Like you, especially in an industry like this, it's somehow kind of a small industry. A lot of the names. Everybody kind of knows somebody who knows somebody else.
Mhm.
And so I had mentioned earlier that a lot of how we grew is really word of mouth and referrals. And I think that's a little bit how the industry is. And so I think that would definitely be one of our primary goals, is to be a name that resonates with people as a team that is really good at what we do and really cares. Like
Mhm.
we're really very passionate about this. And I don't know if that shows or not, but we are. And
Yeah.
so I think that we want that to be something that everybody knows and everybody can see and everybody can appreciate, because we ultimately started because we want to make a difference.
Yeah.
We want to provide something when we were on the other side, that was something we were looking for. So that's what we want, I guess, ultimately.
And I love that, like I love your story so much though, because so many people complain, right,
Yeah,
about how things are run and how things are, but don't actually do anything to change it,
right.
and they just want to complain about it. And like you and your partners were like, let's let we don't like this piece and we like this piece. Let's make it what we like and just do it together
Right.
and build it the way we want. And I think that's like you went out and did something and
Yeah.
and it's working, right? So
Yeah,
like and I think
exactly.
your passion behind it a huge reason why. Like, I think, like you said, like, I can tell you care just by talking to you.
Glad. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah. It's very true. Like it's absolutely that. And that's absolutely where it came from. Just like the sort of, I guess I think we got a little lucky that in the conversation somebody said, like, why don't we just do it? Because otherwise we probably would have just talked, but we are a bunch of people who are also, we have a bit of a bias for action, I suppose.
Mhm.
So you can only talk for so many years and complain for so many years before you
Yeah.
just get, or like, we have got to do something.
And also, it sounds like you started a company with like some of your like best friends.
Yeah, yeah, we are a pretty close group, and so that I think that's actually probably very true. It worked out well for us.
And are you all like physically located like very far apart, or are you kind of centrally
No,
located?
I mean, some of us, yeah, but so we've got Jersey, New York, 2 New Yorks, um, Florida, California, Jersey, New York,
Mhm.
Florida, California. I didn't forget anybody. Okay. So we're a little bit all over, but not, some of us are here. The
Yeah.
bulk of us are here.
So we're just about out of time, but I want to ask you this. I ask this of every single guest pretty much it comes on this podcast. So, like, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
You know more than you think you do. I think it's what I say to my claims professionals now. And it's definitely something that I think I'm still telling myself a little bit. It's sometimes it comes as a surprise. That I don't think I don't think I ever would have imagined that I would be where I am. I don't think that I ever, like, I think that my younger self would have thought that I would still be dreaming about it right now. So I
Yeah.
think the idea that, like, yes, you can do this because you are, you know more than you think you do. Don't sell yourself short. That kind of thing, I think, would have been something that I definitely needed to hear.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also like a hard thing to like convince yourself though too. You're like, no, I
Yeah,
really don't know this. Like, no, but
right.
you might.
Your story when you first started out really resonated with me, like that you're like, I have, like, they asked me something and I have no idea how to do this, like, and then who do I even ask? 'Cause how do you say, like, I don't even know where to begin, like, what kind of, I'm the kind of person, if you ask me something, if my boss ever asked me something and I didn't know how to do it, I would do, like, 18 hours of research on it, trying to figure out all the things I could before admitting I didn't know. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And so, and I think that that's definitely something that always sticks with me, is the idea that, like, when you really think about that, when I think about, like, my younger self having done those things, just having the ability to, like I said earlier, ask those questions and knowing what to do the research on to get me in the right
Yeah.
direction, and knowing then, okay, now that I've done all that and I've got sort of a pseudo background in the thing that I don't know, I at least know the question that I want to ask, so I feel less stupid. And that's kind of an important thing to do, to be able to do. Like, not everybody does that. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think me at the time realized how important that was. That's the way that I think. The idea that I'm going to figure it out. If I don't know, I will find out, because
Yeah.
I can't accept and I don't know for myself. So
Yeah. And there's always a way to figure it out. This is what I tell my
exactly.
kids all the time when they ask me a question. I'm like, I don't know, but let's look it up.
Yeah. Now I have my almost 8-year-old telling me, well, can't you just find out? I'll say, I don't know. She's like, we should research that. I'm like, well, I'm cooking dinner. Can we research it tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm driving. I'm driving right now.
Like, not now. Something's working though, so I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're making an impact.
Exactly.
Well, Cait, I appreciate you so much. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you, because this is a great networking tool
Yes,
for you too. This is
definitely.
word of mouth. We have claims professionals and attorneys alike listening to this program. So
Awesome.
I want them to find you and expand your network.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, our website is tivramanagement.com, Tivra, management spelled out. We have a LinkedIn as well. I don't know what the URL for that is, but you can find us on LinkedIn, Tivra Management. And definitely, yeah, I'm always looking for networking, and word of mouth, like I said, is definitely how we do what we do. So
Yeah. And again, I can't say this enough. Like, congratulations to you,
you.
and your partners. Like,
Amazing.
what you've done in 1 year. I almost want to have you back this time next year so you can like give us an update on where you are, because you've done a lot, and
Thank
it's
you
really,
so
really
much.
impressive.
Well, it was such a fun chat with you guys today. I really appreciate it, and I really had a great time. I really enjoyed this.
Me as well. And of course, for all our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. And you can find us on your favorite streaming platform as well as YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.